Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name's Aaron. I'm going to be reviewing episode 8 of Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, which premiered very late last night for me. So I'm going to offer my thoughts on that in just a moment. I certainly hope you'll check out the links down below in the description section. I've got some links that'll link you to my Spotify, my Bandcamp, and the work that I do. And if you're new here, welcome. If you're a new subscriber to either Spotify or YouTube or whatever, thank you very much. Very glad you're here. Just a little bit about me for those who may not know. I am a composer. I'm a musician, and I write music that's inspired by Tolkien. That's one of the things that I do. It's one of the hats that I wear. So I have a project called the SILMARILLIon Symphony, and I'm very, very invested in the lore. So for me, I definitely feel like I have something to say about Rings of Power, or at least Tolkien in general. I've been promising a video on Tolkien and writing for ladies and female characters that I have some things to say about, but I've been promising that for a couple of weeks and I haven't been able to get to it. So that is in the pipeline, and I'm going to shoot that soon because there's a lot to say about that. There's many things in our, I would say, in our modern discourse that we care about how these things come across, and I think Tolkien may be misunderstood, mainly for the fact that his more popular books do in fact have a little bit less in terms of female heroism. But I think that's a shallow take, and I think there's things to be said about that. So in the future, I'll be tackling that. I'm not sure how long that video will be, but I certainly hope you'll watch it and give me a fair hearing. I try to give everyone kind of a fair shake here as I'm reviewing these things, such as Rings of Power and the folks running it and talking about the production. I also do write music for film. And so from a production standpoint, I have a little bit of insight. I've not been doing this for terribly long, but I've been doing it long enough and doing music to picture long enough that I have some empathy for what production teams deal with. Not on the same scale, but it's the same kind of idea. It's definitely in the same ballpark or same category, let's say. But without any further ado, let's get into reviewing episode 8. And I'll start from the top with where I came from on this. I tweeted this last night. I'll leave my Twitter down below if you want to check it out. You can see some of my takes as I was watching it yesterday. And I did watch it again today to try and take some more mental notes on it. I'm very much about shooting from the hip. I'm not here to do really clinical scientific analysis of text versus the screenplay. I'm not into that. I know with an adaptation, you're not going to get verbatim and the same vibe, but at any rate, I do, of course, take these things seriously. So watching, kind of my expectation was last night when I watched, I really wanted to like it, and unfortunately, I was pretty disappointed by the end of it. And that's not to say that I could do better necessarily, because I don't know that I could. But I do wonder why certain tacks were taken, and I think better answers, need to be given. I'm not saying you're not going to launch a federal inquest as to why the creators and showrunners of Rings of Power, and I would call them the creators because this is very different from how I personally view Tolkien. This is, I don't want to say Tolkien in name only, but that's definitely been out in the ether. People a little bit harsher opinions as mine. But I really would love to know why they're taking these tacks that they're taking, because some of it just doesn't make sense. So we start out with the Harfoots. I'll try and recap this in brief form. I don't have it in front of me. I'm not going to do screen shares or screen grabs of it, and that's probably for the better. We start with the Harfoots, start with Nori and, who we think is Nori. Really, it's one of the Sauron cult members, and they definitely look the part. Um, and of course, the stranger is sort of walking around trying to figure out what the deal is, and you get this is probably the most clear vision of evil you actually get in the entire thing. Because for me, it's unambiguous when they're using the image of Nori to bait the stranger over there to be like, "Oh, you're Sauron, by the way." And then, of course, as spoiler alert, they get it wrong. He's not Sauron. The stranger's not Sauron. The stranger is one of the Istari, and they're about 1,500 years early or so. Or he is about 1,500 years early. Not sure what the jam is there, but here we are. That's a first thing. I think I'll talk about the evil bit first, because the Istari coming early in the series doesn't work for me. I think you like shooting the early Third Age would actually be really interesting, but I digress. The fact that these Sauron cult people are using the visage and the appearance of a child to get what they want, that's a really good representation of evil, and I have to give them credit for that, whether they meant it or not. Just trying to use something that you love to drag you in. That's really an interesting thing. I'm not sure where I'm going with the rest of the thought, but it's a good, for me, I have a Christian background, to say the least. So the problem of evil is something that's kind of with my personal belief system all the time. So of course we think about it. And that's not the only thoughts I have on this, but of course, looking at the way that evil could work in that way, that makes perfect sense to me. And so I'll give credit where it's due, to the folks in, that did that, because that was a cool move. And we saw that, I think we saw in episode 7 that, or episode 6, that they could mess with how they look. The cultists, I know they have names. I haven't committed that to memory, but we've seen that they can shift shape. So I'm assuming they're Maiar, because they can do that. And then we've got the Lady Nazgul scene that comes up later. People are calling it that. Whatever. There's all this talk about the unseen world as well, which we'll get to in a little bit. So the stranger ends up dealing with them, and he's still very confused until after, which for me doesn't make a lot of sense, but okay, they're telling their own story. So graciously, we navigate away from that. I've made no secret of it that I am not a big fan of the Harfoot thing. I feel like the story has been stronger overall when they are not there. But we eventually figure out that the stranger is one of the Istari, not Sauron. And that's not until a little later on. Then we move over, and you've got Galadriel speeding to Eregion with Halbrand, who we're also going to figure out who he is. Spoiler alert, if the stranger's not Sauron, then it's got to be Halbrand. And we find that out by the end that is indeed the case. Although he doesn't say, "I am Sauron." And I'm not sure whether that would have been helpful or not. I think it's probably a decent decision to leave it alone. But yeah, that dude's Sauron. Like they telegraphed it pretty hardcore when he's telling Celebrimbor, "Well, this is my gift to you," or something like that. And of course, we've got the whole situation where Elrond and Celebrimbor are basically saying, "Oh, we failed. The Mithril that's supposed to save us, we don't have nearly enough of it." And yeah, so we have to tell Gil-galad about that. And this further irks me. Gil-galad and Celebrimbor are so dumb in this. They're dull. They don't have a lot of intelligence to them at all. They don't have the foresight that one would typically associate with the elves. and I would say Celebrimbor, particularly, probably the oldest one there, is completely daft. And so I find that very dissatisfying. As you know, right from the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring, which I'm going to watch to enjoy what I consider a better depiction of the elves is, which it accomplishes it in like 5 minutes, with Galadriel narrating how the rings were made and so forth, where they're, the fairest and wisest of all life. It ain't these guys. And what's really aggravating about that is Celebrimbor, Gil-galad, Galadriel, all really high up and highly thought of, it would seem, from the Legendarium. They're from the noblest of families. Gil-galad is, depending on which version of the Legendarium you want to go with, it's either Galadriel's brother, which is Christopher Tolkien rejected, or he's Galadriel's nephew, or something like that, or like at worst cousin. But I believe it's nephew. Orodreth's son is, I think, what Christopher Tolkien settled on. Even though the Silmarillion makes him Fingon's son. So it's a little muddy. But these are all people of the Noldor, which they're associated with wisdom historically. And even if you have no rights to the Silmarillion for this, and I understand that, and I don't expect stuff like that. The bits they've dropped in there from that would have been Silmarillion-esque, they don't really bother me either way. Other than Galadriel getting sent back to Valinor as if it's some kind of reward, which I don't believe. And that's really not the way that Tolkien did it. But the Noldor are wise. They're also impetuous. That's fine. I have no problem showing a little bit of that. I thought they overcooked it with Galadriel, and I think finally in this episode they sort of reined that back in. And props for the emerald green dress with the gold. That was cool. That was good. That was a good word. I really like that wardrobe choice. I know the guys were wearing it too. Saw Elrond and Celebrimbor wearing it as well. I can work with that. That's the most Galadriel-esque that Galadriel has looked in the entire first season. And so I kind of hope they double down on that, because I feel like that's better. It's a better look. And they also found a way in the shot to make her look taller, which also was really good. So I'll give them credit for that. Still, overall, I'm fairly disappointed with the episode in that they finally get to making the elven rings. And again, I've talked about the concerns over timeline, and that the timeline could really be all over the place with this thing, because you're basically pitching it so that Elendil is going to be a major character. You know he's going to be there next time. You know they're going to have the War of the Last Alliance. Numenorian men, 400, 500 years they live. So they have to compress all this action into that. And just an FYI, the Rings of Power are made in like the 1600s of the Second Age. Well, this is long before Elendil's alive. So Galadriel wasn't meeting him then, but I know they have to do their thing. The Forging of the Rings of Power. This was easily let me think. Perhaps the most irritating bit about the whole thing for me. I don't know if Tolkien really gives the parentage of who is supposed to do decides to do the three rings, but in the show they make Galadriel do it, and I'm pretty sure if there's anybody that it makes the most sense, it would be Celebrimbor that's saying, we need to do three. We're going to make three of them. And I could say that he probably had three people in mind for it. Of course, where's Círdan? Where's Celeborn? We need answers on this, people. They're saying he's dead. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I think next season he's alive. because second age Elrond doesn't really do much of anything unless he married. And of course, he's leading an army, but Arwen comes from somewhere, people. Like, so he's got to marry Galadriel's daughter at some point. So who knows how they're going to do this, how they're going to square that. But with the rings, it didn't make a lot of sense. I didn't love how they set up Halbrand and Celebrimbor. Again, it just made Celebrimbor look really stupid. And yes, to speak to how, speaking of the historical Noldorin families, like he's a Fëanorian, and he's the last one that we at least have record of in the Second Age. We know Maglor's running around the sea somewhere singing sadly, but he's not a factor here. So we know the Fëanorians all could craft stuff, and they're really good at it. But Celebrimbor is just like not. It's not. It's not doing anything for me. Like the idea that they wanted to make a crown or something to fend off the decay. They knew the decay was happening anyway. The elves knew this. This wasn't like some, oh my gosh, like this is the thing. It's like they're bound to the world. Anyway, so I really wasn't a fan of that. Also, I just have to say the way the rings actually look to me. I'm assuming it was Weta that did all of it, just like they did in the original trilogy. I've seen some of the replicas of the original trilogy, and they look way better than what I saw there. Way better. So I wasn't thrilled by that, but maybe it looks better when you wear it. Some things are like that, right? Pick up a shirt off the rack. It looks stupid. You put it on. It looks great. And then you buy it. Maybe that's how this will work out. Maybe it'll look great on Galadriel's finger. Who knows? The other bit that's very interesting there is that Galadriel, after she's confronting Halbrand about who are you, because she's starting to smell something at this point, and it's nice to see some savvy from her, even if belatedly. I guess they meant it that way. I didn't see a lot of savvy from her the rest of the time. Like, not a lot of wisdom, not a lot of cleverness or savvy or super intelligence. Saw the athleticism. Tolkien did talk about that. Give them props where they deserve them. The flashback to Finrod. Shameless plug. My album Finrod is down below. I really care about this character, and I don't like what they did with him. And I know he's just a small part of it, but he's the whole reason why Galadriel in the show is the way she is. And I don't like how they did it. I've made no secret of the fact that I think elves should have longer hair than I do, or at least longer than the pompadour thing that Elrond's rocking, and Celebrimbor, and at least Gil-galad has long hair. I give him this much. That they got that right, and that's what that is. But I do not like the way Finrod looks at all. I'm like, this is not the way I associate him. And of course, I've got a access to a memory of 20 years of looking at art that's inspired by this stuff, and every one of them, I think they all have long hair. Every one of them. But there are things that adaptations do. I remember in Two Towers when they did the Battle of Helm's Deep, curved swords for all the elves. Same thing with Last Alliance, apparently. If I can remember right. Again, I'm going to watch it at some point this weekend. The only one with a curved sword in the first stage was Eglamoth of Gondolin, and everybody else, I guess, had a straight sword or a spear or something. But they mentioned that by name is like he was like the only one with a curved sword. Interesting. So Jackson went with that probably because it looked cool. So again, decisions are made in adaptations, and we the people just have to get on with it or not. For me, I'm not entirely loving. I just don't like the short hair for the elves, and I think bring back the long hair, like they're going to have to show some age on the elves at some point, or at least that time has passed. So maybe Elrond grows out the flow. That would be great. Celebrimbor, well, spoiler alert, he's going to be dead at some point, probably in the next season. But there's a lot of setup coming, I want to say, in the Anatar Sauron story, where it's as if Halbrand has spent all his time really just trying to deceive Galadriel. Like, he didn't spend a lot of time in Eregion. So the way that bit felt kind of rushed. And so that's a little interesting because of how that plays out in the books. It's like the way Tolkien put it, or at least set it up, is it took some time. And it's like Sauron hung out there for a while, convincing people that he was changed. In this adaptation, it's just not feeling like that time was really spent on it. And maybe they're going to try and do it in the second season, but it's like he's already revealed as Sauron at this point, so you can't really put that genie back in the bottle. So that really doesn't sit great with me. And that whole scene where they basically took yes out of the book and yes out of the Jackson trilogy, they basically repurposed an entire thing of dialogue. And you'll know it when you see it. If you're a person that loved the movies, I was somebody that watched the movies before I read the book Lord of the Rings. I read The Hobbit when I was like 13, but I didn't read Lord of the Rings until I was 16, 17, 18, 19 or 20 or something like that. I was quite a bit late to that. In fact, I think I read the Silmarillion in full before I read Lord of the Rings, which I don't think I'm the only one that's like that, but I'm definitely not in the majority. If you're a person that read the Silmarillion before Lord of the Rings, drop me a comment down below. Love to talk to you, or at least shoot you a comment. But yeah, so the way this is sitting with Sauron in the lore, it's like they've kind of let the genie out of the bottle. It feels like early. They tried to show the stuff as he says, I wanted to be in Numenor, but you wanted me to come to Middle-earth. Until the exchange with Galadriel and Halbrand / Sauron, he is still quite a bit more likable than she is until she figures it out. And that is just mind-boggling to me. I don't know how I don't know how one does that, but that's how it happened. So Galadriel is tempted, just like she sort of is in the Fellowship. Not buying it. Not really. That's when she flashes back and sees Finrod, and you can see Sauron, Halbrand is sort of manipulating that vision, which is, again, an interesting tack. And making this about Sauron wanting to heal the world, here's the thing. I wouldn't go too hard on that angle, and the reason I wouldn't is because I read the Silmarillion, and I read The Downfall of Numenor. This dude, speaking of Sauron, yes, he deceives Pharazôn. I don't know how they're going to deceive Pharazôn, or they're going to show, like, big parts of Season 1 footage or something in retrospect in Season 2 to show Halbrand deceiving Pharazôn into something. And I need to go back over the appendices to make sure I'm not blowing smoke here, but I would not go hard on Sauron healing the world as a main thing. It's in there, or at least a little bit. But the vast majority of the thing is like, you've got this guy teaching the Númenóreans to do human sacrifice, and to give sacrifices and worship Morgoth, so that he'll release them from death. Now, I might be off here. I don't think I am. But if you're convincing people to do human sacrifice, that the first Dark Lord would take away what is the gift of men from a Luvatar, you're convincing them to do that. You ain't healing anything. You're destroying people. So Sauron obviously did not double down on this heal the world thing. And again, we've seen 8 episodes. We've seen 8.5 hours of TV, 9 hours of TV on this. So there's still a lot more to come, I would think. But I like doubling down on Sauron trying to be a good guy and whatever else, like they did in the dialogue. Not a good decision. Not for me. Not when he was convincing the Númenóreans to do human sacrifice. That's just completely incongruent. And I know Sauron, very pragmatic, intelligent, the whole thing, domineering, manipulative, the whole thing, all about power. But hey, yeah, no, not to heal the world. I'm sorry. Like I think they just set it up very nicely when Galadriel's talking about it. Kate Blanchett Galadriel at the beginning of the Fellowship, talking about when Sauron made the ring, he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. That's the Sauron we know. Of course, you want to show a little bit of him trying to repent, I suppose, because it does say it in the Silmarillion, is that, Sauron did flee after the War of Wrath, but eventually I guess he softened a little bit about things, but still, he's still Sauron. He was the chief servant of Morgoth. And I'm not sure how much change you're going to have. And he'd been serving Morgoth since before, the sun came up. So, I mean, sun rose for the first time kind of a thing. So, yeah, I'm not really digging that, but I'll move on to something else, I suppose. We do not have, I'll just go here quickly just to get out of the way, nothing from Arondir and Bronwyn and Theo, which I was surprised how little I missed it, because I did not miss it. And yeah, so that was intriguing to me that was the case. But again, you got 4 or 5 plot lines going. They had a little bit of Pharazôn, they got a little bit of Aryan, Aryan and the Palantir, which they'll unpack in the next one. That's an interesting little point. It's not terribly compelling, but it's cool. She's involved somehow. It is funny. Other people have pointed this out. Other people have mentioned this to me as well. It's what is her deal? What does she? I don't see what she does. I don't see what she does. She does a lot of running around looking at things, and I just find it hilarious that at the end of it, her last action is to stare into the Palantir. That the girl who stares. Wild. Again, I guess something for a completely made up character, right? So I guess do whatever you like. But boy, it's a little on the nose, I'd say. So there was that, and Tar Palantir dies finally, and they raise the black sails of Númenor, and of course that's as Elendil and Miriel are getting home. My guess is they do the downfall of Númenor coming up soon. And the way they set up Sauron and the human sacrifices is that he's already planted that in Pharazôn, and they'll show it as a memory or something like that. Because Númenor's got to go down, because that's how Elendil and the boys end up back in Middle-earth. Side note on that, the fact that nobody is looking for Isildur is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I do not understand that decision at all. Again, you've got a bunch of different little plot lines. That's probably why. Still don't dig it. Because Elendil and Isildur later on in the Legendarium, they're fighting together in Mount Doom. against Sauron. They're on the same side. They're founding kingdoms together. They're not messing around with this stuff. Where were you in the fire thing? Like, no. I'm trying to think if there's anything else of substance to talk about. I do like that Galadriel gets slightly more likable toward the end of it. Despite the fact that this is the one caveat I have about it is that she doesn't tell Elrond who Halbrand is. And once again, showing what a terrible leader she is. Like, terrible. Like, it's literally Sauron. Like, give me a break. I'm not feeling that at all. Again, you're talking about Galadriel. She's been alive since before the sun came up, as they tell us. Or maybe it was Celebrimbor that talked about that. Anyway, like, Galadriel's so wise in the books, and this version is just not. Although she's starting to turn, I feel like she's starting to turn the corner, which will make me feel better about it. Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, that'll make me feel a little bit better about the trajectory of the character. So there's that. But why she isn't telling them Sauron is here? Because that's what she would do. Like in the lore, that's exactly what she would do. Not that this is exactly what happened, because it isn't. But this is bananas. Really not a fan of that. So we have that bit. Again, Gil-galad is just a dumb, curmudgeonly dude. Like, he's got almost no foresight. He's not terribly insightful, even though he's got some little bits here and there. And of course, Elrond holds up his own advice in his face, which is a little turd kid move to do, but he wasn't wrong, I guess. We do get a shot in this as Gil-galad's last little sequence there, where he's talking with Elrond, and Elrond's basically convincing him to give them more time to build the rings, or whatever Celebrimbor's thinking about. And you get a shot of Gil-galad's weapon, Aglos, which looks legit. It's legit. Still wielded by a dummy, but here you go. And again, I really don't. That's not resonating with me at all. How dull the elves are, and I would say, around like in the guy characters, if I wanted to identify strongly with any of them, it's really hard to, because they're really, like, all the elves are kind of goofy. Elrond's okay. Celebrimbor just not doing it for me. Gil-galad, they did him dirty. And we don't have Celeborn. I like the guy that was looking through the library. He was all right. He did the work. He wasn't a tool. But your main male characters need to have a little bit more panache than that. And it's just not doing it for me. Arondir's all right. Elendil's all right. Isildur and Valandil, they're okay. Like, it's not very terribly compelling. They're not overly heroic. And to be fair, like, Elendil hasn't done anything huge yet. And they're setting that up with his dialogue with Miriel. They kind of had a moment there, which I can't tell if that's a pseudo-romantic moment or something like that. The widower and the regent. We'll see where it goes in the next season, I suppose. But I don't know. That's about it for me. I think. Oh, one more bit. Okay, the shot where you come out from the eye of the one guy at the end, and this is right at the end before they go to the poem song, I would say. Which I've listened to it twice now, and it's grown on me a little bit, but I'm still not loving it. But anyway, That's a musical concern. That has nothing to do with it. I'd be interested as to know what they were going for there. Because it was technical things. There's a lot of bent notes and stuff like that. That I'm like, I'd be interested to know what you were thinking. So I'm thinking that's Bear McCreary and the vocalist that worked really hard on that. So I'm not going to bag that out, not understanding where they're coming from. But we come out of the eye, and then you see it's Halbrand, and quite honestly, that looked very CGI and very like, I don't know, like I've watched a lot of TV on 4K TVs and stuff like that, and the hyper real thing does not work for me. This looked like a shot out of Marvel, and that really ticked me off. I'm like, we're not there. So that just he looked kind of like a Marvel comic book kind of a character at that point. And I'm just like, that's not Sauron. That's not it. So that just doesn't feel right. So the folks that have said, and I know this has been done in the media, that this series is a love letter to Tolkien. No, it is not. Not for me. Of course, you're welcome to disagree. Go ahead and drop in the comments below. We'll talk. But I believe that's all I've got for the season finale of Rings of Power. And I certainly look forward to hearing more from all of you. Please do check out some of the past videos that I've done. I think I've got everything from this season. I didn't do episode 5 because I wasn't feeling well that week, but everything's there, and definitely check out the links in the description section below. If you want to continue being in Middle Earth or immersing yourself in that world, I've got quite a bit of music and more coming based on exactly that. I, of course, and who wouldn't say this, is that, well, I think my work is more faithful to the lore. See, everybody can say this, so this is why having the conversation is important, right? But definitely check out the Silmarillion Symphony. Check out the FINROD CD. That came out last year around Christmas. So that one's been out for almost a year, and I'm pretty proud of what I was able to do with that one. And that stuff's all free to listen to on Spotify. If you have a Spotify account, go link to me in there. But I thank you very much for watching. Keep your eyes out for more videos in the future. I'll be talking about Tolkien. I'm still going to aim to do at least once a week, if not twice. And I'll entertain you with thoughts of the lore and talking about different characters and whatever else, and other things that matter to me in the world. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to talk to you all soon. Thank you.